Good morning. Happy Thursday. It is Explicit Measures Podcast with Seth, Mike, and Tommy. We're here to talk some more about things. Today is our topic around Charticulator.
This is how locked in Mike is.
Locked
today.
in. Mike is dialed in. Today we're going to be talking about Charticulator and some custom visualizations. We've talked about this before, but we're going to hone in on a specific visual. We're going to try to talk specifically around the Charticulator one. But before we get going, Tommy has some interesting news. We were talking previously around this thing, a new API that was recently released called the Scanner API. And Tommy was angry that no one had blogged about it, and there was no content available for the Scanner API. Nothing available. But Tommy has since found some Scanner API documentation, or actually some tooling to help him build stuff. Give us the details, Tommy.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna have to write a blog on this too, just so
Yes, you
there's some
should.
article out there.
Uh-huh.
Yes,
I would
yes.
love it.
When I'll find the time. So, but basically, so we talked about this probably maybe a month ago when the Scanner API was updated with enhanced metadata. So basically, giving you like the DAX query, the DAX measures, the M queries, all the metadata that's in a tenant, and would basically scan it, which was great. So there's a few configuration steps you have to do in Azure and security groups, but I was looking for basically like, how can I automate this and then build a report out of this?
Yep.
And finally I need to, I'll try to find the mention, but I think his name was Furrow Colin, but he basically talked about, he had a repo on GitHub that was for the original one. And it's basically a Microsoft flow that you put in your kind of own URL metadata, and it does the whole thing where it scans based on the workspaces and then pulls it in. He had it where every time you refresh, and he had a template report file.
Mm-hmm.
He had it where basically every time you refresh the report, it would call the scanner.
Yep.
I've been updating it and basically just pushing it into a JSON file that you would save. And then I have data flows for each table. So like reports, data sets, and I'm creating a template file, and I should have that out hopefully soon.
That sounds like a great opportunity for a blog. Explain what you're doing, show the code, and then we'll put the PBIT file out in on the Power BI Tips store, and that way people can get it and start using it and ingesting data off of the Scanner API, which sounds like. And there's and you're saying you're kind of blown away, but you were telling us just before the call.
Oh my gosh,
there's a lot going on there, and inside the Scanner API, it's pretty detailed on what you can get from a data set, the measures, the tables, all the way down to the M that comprises each of the tables.
Yeah. And what's even crazier about that is like just even looking at, let's say you're trying to move away. We've talked about this too with data flows, where you're trying to move away from one particular data flow and you need to move to the updated one. Well, I can see what, like basically what tables are using this, or what data sets. So I can say, hey, this data flow is being used in these reports. Okay, good. Now I can identify that and kind of migrate from that.
Yeah.
Finally, having that dependencies, or I can look at basically like drill down into a data set and see all the measures and see all the measure formulas. So it's pretty intense, and I just still a lot to comb through to kind of clean up the model, but the flow works great. And you just can schedule it every morning, save it to a JSON file, you're good to go.
Nice. While we transition,
go
ahead.
It pull out the relationships and things like that as well? Like
yeah, it has relationships. Relationships too, and data sources. So then you can say, hey, what's using SQL, and what server and what database?
Yeah.
What's using even every URL path. Like if something's using a file, and you can see what sources they're using. So you can create different views. So if I want to say a data set to what they're using, or say what's using this SQL database.
You know why they came up with all this?
Huge help.
Yeah, it's a huge win. And when a Power BI file gets published in the service, it gets broken apart into many different pieces. So the Power BI file is actually a file that you work on, and that's really only used for desktop. Yeah. And once you publish a PBX file, it gets broken into all of its individual components and stored in various places inside, basically the Power BI environment. And so all this information has to be there somewhere, because the report has to work.
Yeah.
We just don't have any access to the data yet. And so this is the first time we're seeing a really deep dive there. And I believe also with this, I don't know if I think it's out now, but I haven't played with it 100% yet, is you can actually start turning on Azure logs as well
Yeah.
on top of your data models. So you have a data model, you can then turn on logging now, and every single query coming to that model, whenever you click on a visual or a bar chart or a bar in a bar chart, every single query will then get captured and stored in Azure audit
Yeah.
logs. And so you can then you look at very detailed information around. Basically, you're listening to the traces on the analysis services
Yeah.
model now too. So we're getting a lot better tooling, and I guarantee you, the reason why the scanner API had to be turned on was because this is a purview level feature. I think what I'm seeing here is we get access to it because it's an API. But the reason Microsoft is exposing a lot of these things is they're going to build tooling around this, like Purview, that lets you
Mhm.
see all of the SQL level sources and lineage of all your data sets and define things. And then they also want you to see, oh, by the way, here's all your Power BI level stuff as well.
Yeah. No, and
Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, I'm amazed more as I'm combing through
Yeah.
all of the data that no one's written about it yet. Like that, I'm
Tommy,
even
you're the
more
first.
amazed now.
You've made
So
it on official on the
it shouldn't be
podcast.
me.
It should be you, Tommy. You
It
gotta.
should be someone a
you
lot
should-
better at
you
this.
gotta-
so
You got to take the bull by the horns.
Yeah.
I'm
Tommy.
gonna take the
You know,
bull by the
If
horns.
you don't claim the
so-
idea, someone else
Step in.
will. Exactly.
Uh,
All right.
Tomorrow.
You're starting to stir the pot here, man. There's
So-
so much in there.
So I said check it out, but actually everyone listening, don't check it out. Wait for me to
Yeah, wait for Tommy to write the blog post. Then we'll post that.
and then you check it out.
All right, excellent, super cool. Love that idea. That'll be a lot of fun to kind of see that when kind of come to reality. There, it'll be a lot of fun. Moving on, let's start talking about some of the topic today. So Charticulator. I'm gonna kick it over to Seth and give us just kind of a quick overview of Charticulator, and if you miss any details, I'll fill it in.
Shouldn't you start this one off, man?
I mean, I
Why?
talk a lot to begin with, anyways, in these things.
Like,
So
hey, what is Charticulator?
Yeah.
Hey, Seth. Hey, Seth.
Hey, guy.
I'm the guy. That
Hey, guy who never
15
uses
You're on
years ago-
Charticulator.
You're on
Everything.
vacation. You're outside
Hey,
in gorgeous.
No. Charticulator is Mike's favorite custom visual building tool.
That it
and
is.
Has been the biggest fan since day one.
Mhm.
No, Charticulator is our way. I would say as business users or BI people to get into the custom visual building arena a little bit. And for as complex as some of the pieces can be, or the learning curve is a little high at the start, it opens up a lot of possibilities in unique visualization.
Yep.
To bring insights into a Power BI report in a unique way that isn't supported within the native visuals.
Yeah, totally would agree with
So
that.
it used to be a third-party tool. Or I'm sorry, not a third-party tool. So this came out of the Microsoft Research Lab. It was a separate website. It was kind of a download thing. And I believe you made a tool called Charts to kind of dovetail onto that code.
Still don't like the name.
And recently recently they added it into the tool.
Yes.
As is it native now, or is it custom visual?
It's still a custom visual, but now you can
Custom visual.
now
you can embed it.
yes, you
And
know
the whole experience is built into it within Power BI. And frankly, for playing around with it in Power BI desktop, I've been impressed, just from the build the whole designer into the framework kind of back and forth is a good experience.
So let me give some history on like where I've integrated with it. So I saw this come out, and so I'm coming from a world of there's basically two leading tools. I think at this point you could say there's Tableau and then there's Power BI. How you build visuals in Tableau. When I was doing my master's in data science, I did a little bit of time in Tableau, just got some experience around how that tool works. And basically, it boils down to you build a single visual. So you have like a report canvas in Tableau, and you build one visual at a time, and then you kind of collect visuals together onto a page, and that kind of becomes your Tableau level report. But the whole experience there is really around designing a single visual. Now, there's this concept of like bespoke visual building, right? I have a two-dimensional area, X and Y, Z, like X and Y axes on things. And then that's, every dimension of something has properties, right? So if I put a shape on the page, the shape could have it could be a circle, it could be a square. So you can have data drive the shape of something, and then that shape has additional properties, right? That the shape would have transparency or a border or a background or a drop shadow. So an object has properties, and then any of those properties could be bound to some sort of data. And that's kind of the principle of how Tableau builds things. It's kind of like there are shapes, there are objects, there are things on a page, and you can design data to drive characteristics of those properties. On the flip side, we have Power BI, which is coming much more out of the, I would say, the drag and drop. Is to quote Christian Wade, clicky, clicky, draggy, droppy. You have a data model, you have some measures and columns, and then you click a button, and then you kind of fill in the properties. Okay, here's the data for the bar. Here's the data for the X, the Y axis, and here's the legend color kind of thing. So a lot simpler, right? So basically the visual is defined, and you have a much narrower set of properties you can bind your data to. And so I felt there was a large gap initially when there was Power BI with this limited visual set. It had a lot of visuals, but you couldn't do a lot with them. Everyone wanted to change transparencies and like have custom label legends on different parts of the bar chart and hide and show things dynamically and all kinds of other things, right? There's a lot of people who come up with a lot of really creative solutions. We didn't even have formulas initially to drive color of a bar. That's something that's been more recently for us. So a lot more has been added, and it's enriching a lot more of the experience around Power BI visuals, but you were beholden to Microsoft to develop the feature, and then you could use it. And then this Charticulator space, I think, was like this. It was a research project, and I saw when it came out initially, I was like, oh my gosh, this is really cool. And I was very frustrating at the beginning because I did not understand how to use it or learn it.
There was literally nothing out there.
There was nothing out there, and the documentation wasn't very good, and they didn't even have videos with words over them. Like the video content was just not there, and so I loved it so much that I took a copy of their GitHub repo because it was a public repo. I took a copy of it and I made charts.powerbi.tips because I wanted to play with the program and learn how it worked. And so I did that. I built a gallery around some visuals that I've built and some of the community built visuals and put all those together. And a gentleman that really inspired me initially was Nick Snap on Twitter. Yeah. And he was like designing stuff. I'm like, how the heck is he even doing this? Like stuff it's beautiful. It's not just a visual. It's got wavy lines and it's got these bands that are drawing bands, transparent bands between data points. And I was like, how the heck does this work? This is so cool. So that's what really hooked me. It's like, this is a tool that can really do anything. And so I really jumped into it very early on. So this kind of, I think, frames a lot of our conversation today is, right, we're seeing Microsoft migrate from, so initially Charticulator was a website. That was it. And then it moved closer to being an actual custom visual. So they took the whole visual building experience, bundled it into a third party, or basically not third party. I keep saying third party. They basically bundled it into a custom visual. So you can go to the App Source store and download it and build and load it. And now you have the full visual experience inside desktop, which I think is a great move. I would love to see the integration be tighter. And I would really like to see Charticulator be like a native visual that's just inside desktop. So you can just build there and it outputs what it needs to right in desktop for you. It should be either a preview feature or something you can turn off or turn on in the settings, but Charticulator needs to be part of the base program. I feel like it fills a very large gap or void that you need when you start going highly customized visuals.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things. Did you catch the July release notes?
Yes, I did.
You made a couple points, or I'll make a couple points on there. One is they added a ton of new properties that you can change, right, dynamically.
And I'm going to have some gripes on these because I like it.
But then there were a bunch of improvements or tweaks to Charticulator as well, right?
Agreed. Yes. So great announcement. I'm really happy that they're improving it. Another gentleman in my Daniel Marsh Patrick. We have been adding, so it's an open library. You can change the code in GitHub today. So I went to Daniel. I said, "Hey, I have a challenge I need to have. I want to do interquartile ranges data calculations. It's not available today. You didn't have the formula, So we worked together. I said, "Hey, this is what I want to do." He goes, "Oh, I'll just build it." And literally within like a half a day, he went out, wrote the code, and it was like literally like a couple lines of code because the functions were available. Doing interquartile
Sure.
ranges or um, standard deviation type calculations, they're very well known. It's not an unknown thing. He added the functions and added it to the library. So now so this version, which I was very pleased, now has additional calculations. So now I can actually make a box and whisker plot using the built-in functions now. So anyways, I'm
Interesting.
that it's allowing
So
the community to even contribute to this thing.
that is awesome. So before we get into the nuts and bolts of Charticulator, because you kind of have to right away.
Yeah.
What is this visual good for, or what is the, we call it a custom visual, but what is this framework, or when we're gonna output certain things, what is a good use case for Charticulator?
So I think this is actually a good point. Daniel Marsh-Patrick also brings up a really good point about talking about the spectrum of custom visuals or visuals in general, right? You have on one end of the spectrum fully built in. It's a Microsoft visual, it's a bar chart, right? It comes with the application. You have that on one end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, you can build a custom visual from scratch. So you can use d3.js. It's an open standard. Microsoft has published a client library, but you can write code to build any visual you want. So you can just, and that's where the custom visuals come from on the app source. People build custom visuals and then use them. So you have either the no code solution or you have the all code solution. So when you look at that scale or that spectrum, yeah, sometimes you need to do something that's not built in. Well, what options do you have that are not built in? The only other option you have, so your first option is go to the app source. Use someone else's code and use their visual to do what you want. That assumes that their visual meets your needs, right? If they have a special visual, you have to expect someone else to build it. So that's one reliance there. You don't have to build anything, but then you can use their visual. I would argue the next level of that is like a Charticulator level. It's a graphical interface that helps you build a custom visual, but you're not really building code. You're adding things to a page. It's still kind of clicky, draggy, droppy, but it's for a single visual. And then you have, beyond that, you have like this project that Daniel Marsh-Patrick came up with, which was Deneb, which is a spec based, and this is based off of Vega and Vega Lite, which are other visual language programming pieces, right? There's a framework. Here's my chart size, here's my x-axis, here's how I bind data from my data set into a bespoke visual, and then you have your full custom. Then beyond that, you have like, okay, I'm writing all code to make the visual. So I think I just want to lay out the spectrum of like what's possible, because once you see all the different options that are out there, you can kind of see, okay, well, Charticulator, yes, it's challenging, but it's less challenging than write your own visual, and it's less challenging than writing JSON for a Deneb project. So it's kind of closer on the Power BI side, but it's still not a standard visual or one that you can get from App Source.
So I know you put a ton of content out there, obviously, and you can hammer on that towards the end of the podcast. But what are like the top 3 things you would recommend people learn right away around Charticulator and some of the key pieces that kind of, snap the fingers of like, oh, okay, that's how that works? Because it is a unique experience.
It totally is. So for me, when I was learning Charticulator, I think what I did not do, which was I could build a bar chart, but I didn't really understand what was happening. So what I like to do, and especially, and this is how I actually have like an 11-part series on YouTube. It's and I'll throw that link.
I said 3, Mike, not 11.
Well, I'm just saying,
get 11.
It was explaining. I go into really detail about how to use it, but
I know.
I would say, like, to start, it was really understanding like what is a glyph. So there's this concept of a glyph in this Charticulator thing, and a glyph is like a collection of elements: a bar, a text box, and then for every data point you have in your data set, you can then change those properties of the collection of glyphs, essentially. And so once you get your head around what that does, that kind of like, it starts showing you what's going on there. So you can think of, one of the number one would be is every, and this is how I build how I build Charticulator visuals is I start with a table. I have a dimension column and then some numbers. So like just, sales by product, something simple. And I know that every row in that table will be a single data point inside the visual. And
You're
that's
saying
where
a table of data.
a table of data. So I literally start with like a table of data, and then I copy that table over, and then I say, okay, change the chart type from a table to Charticulator. And then when I change the visual style, the columns are still there. And then I can see kind of side by side, okay, here's what the data looks like. And then I can start building on top of it. So that was one kind of big hurdle to overcome. Charticulator tries to aggregate everything. So it is by default aggregating data points. So even you'll see inside the program, it'll say like, you grab your sales column and put it on a visual aspect on the page on the glyph. Let's say you take the total sales and you put it on the color for the bar on the bar chart. Well, what that'll do is it'll change each bar to match the number there. But you'll see in the aggregation, it's going to say like max or average sales. You're like, I don't want the average. I want the actual number. But you have to understand that Charticulator has this concept. You can actually do grouping or in visual calculations that you can, let's say I have, well, whatever. That's going to be another topic all itself. But suffice it to say, it does some of the level of its in visual aggregations. And there's no other visual that I'm aware of that's doing that or gives you the control to change calculations in visual like it's doing. A lot of concepts that hit there. All right, Tom. All right, Tommy. Why am I wrong? And why should no one?
Welcome to the podcast.
Well, who's done the 11-part series?
It's a first.
Yeah.
I'm just listening.
Tommy's silent.
Well, no,
I'm just listening.
Tommy's like a cobra right now. Actually, Tommy's sitting back. He's going, okay. Yeah. I'm just waiting for the right moment to strike.
Right.
Yeah.
And tell Michael
tell everyone how simple this is. Please, go ahead.
Well,
no. So
go ahead, Tommy.
Ironically, Mike, one of the best articles, or one of the most an article that has stayed in my mind over all these years is something you wrote back in 2019, and it was doing a dual y-axis line chart in Power BI for Power BI because it wasn't available
at the time.
Frustrating.
Correct.
Yeah, and ironically, that was using Charticulator. So
not ironically,
using the charts that or not ironically, charts that Power BI tips.
Yes,
and it took a while in trying to incorporate it. Like, oh, okay.
Yep.
So I've tried to dive into Charticulator, and I see everything you're saying. It is a powerful tool. It's a powerful visual, things that you cannot do. However, and this is where I think the diverge comes from someone like you who, and not to put accolades, but intelligent, like who's very,
I threw up masters in data science here. I don't think everyone's rolling around with masters in data science.
Kind of thing. And and already kind of familiar with so, and just like I think that alone it makes it a little different for what I'm trying to envision is how is this actually going to get adopted? Like, is it worth? The idea of today was like,
is it worth it?
Is it worth it? And not necessarily for you, but is it worth it on the overall sphere? So I think there's a lot of barriers to entry with it that right now I don't think one person can solve. And I think you've been doing all the heavy lifting. And I think burningsuite.co.uk has been putting out articles too. I think that's it. Those are the only two non-Microsoft support resources. And Microsoft only has that one blog article on introducing Charticulator Preview. So right now, and everything you're saying with the glyphs, what you can do with it, you explained to me what my problem is, okay, that's neat that you can, put the aggregations, you can, really modify everything by formula, but there's no concrete example. Honestly, this is more like our problems with Q&A than it is with custom visuals. Because when we talked about Q&A, it's cool. There's a lot of features, but we don't use it because it's kind of hard to adapt to. It's hard to understand what everything's doing. And again, there's no really good, like the samples right now are like that Charticulator has are kind of like almost meant for like newspapers, like they're the
I would totally agree with that
demographics kind of thing. And so
infographic level,
what can you do with so like everything that you can do with it, I'm really probably not going to create a report for my sales team with any of those visuals. So if I'm trying to be inspired and try to take something and then apply it that way, I need something in a sense a little more basic. And the amount of hours I've spent trying to create a bar chart I almost threw my coffee, not because it was frustrating, but just like, I'm just doing a bar chart here,
Yep.
and it goes through all the steps. If it's this difficult to just visualize a bar chart, one, if I'm not even sure what I'm trying to do or what I'm trying to visualize, but like if I'm trying to do something more complex, what else is going to be involved? So to me, right now, that the worth it side of it, and if I don't know what Microsoft's going to see success for this, because I don't want this to go the way of, we haven't seen any updates on goals since they've been announced, right?
Yep.
So there's no other support resources or templates or samples. There's no GitHub repo on, Power BI Charticulator.
Yep.
You have the charts that Power BI tips, but again, it's not a very wide ranging amount of visuals. So to me, it's that what can you do to be inspired? And then when you're using the tool, the problem of it's a difficult thing to comprehend. And again, yeah. So
Yep.
I'll start with that. Start with that.
Tommy sees me opening my mouth, and I'm back, baby.
I'm back.
So I think you make really good arguments, right? So these are part of the reason why.
Yep.
Connection successful.
We're back.
All right. Sorry about that. I think the connection dropped and came back, so I think we're good there. Tommy, you have to do some editing in post.
Yep.
Let's see if it's going back. All right. I think we're back now. Interesting. Connections are being weird. All right. I think we're good though. All right. So, Tommy, you made a really good point around, is it too complicated? Is it too hard for someone to get over these hurdles? So I would say this. I think it really depends on what you're trying to do from a visual standards standpoint. And I also think it comes from a client request standpoint, right? So if you think about the spectrum, again, I'm talking in like the spectrum of custom or not custom, there is I'll say this, there is a limit that what Power BI can do out of the box. And so, some visuals that Seth and I have been very vocal about is, we feel like there's a lot of limitations around tables. Charticulator is not going to solve that. There are other areas where people just want custom stuff, right? So at some point, like you can't do a comment chart. And so Daniel, Marsh, Patrick just, got on a YouTube with me and we just did a comment chart. So basically how to explain this chart, how it works. It's basically you have a circle on one end and the circle tails off to a point on the other end. It's like a comet, right? It's going a direction. And so what you do is you can show these, it's basically change in position over time on a chart. So it's like a scatter plot. And then what you can do is you can watch these, varying changes over time. Let's say I'm looking at sales this year versus last year. I can then plot the tail of the comet as what it was last year and the head of the comet as what sales was this year. Yeah. So that's a chart type that someone may say, hey, that's interesting. That's different than just showing trend over time on, two bars side by side, right? So it's a little bit more enriching that you can do there. So I think it kind of really depends on who's your audience, because there's probably a good case if you're just building a bunch of reports internally, you might be able just to convince people to like, well, you don't need that. That's a comment chart is not what you really want, right? So you're actually stepping into a realm with Charticulator where you're trying to create some wow factor or some pizzazz around whatever the chart is. Have you had to make a heat map, Tommy?
I have not.
Okay, that's another chart type that's not standard and it's very difficult to make inside desktop. So that's a heat map is another one of these charts. You can go get, there are a number of heat maps on the app stores that you can go get. But if they don't do exactly what you want, and some of them are even paid for. So some of you have to pay. So there's another limit here, right? In app source level or land, right? Companies are building these and they want to monetize on the effort they've spent to build these visuals. Some of them are really well done. XViz is one of the companies that I think that does a really good job on highly customized visuals. But they come with like a monthly subscription fee even.
Yeah.
So you could spend upwards of $1,000 a year on just visuals for Power BI that you're already producing for stuff, depending on what's your audience for those. So I think because of that, and because there's edge cases of where you need other visuals to do different things. So I'll point out one more area that I see that's a weakness here. Have you heard of the International Business Standard for reporting? Have you heard about this? IBSC. Sorry, I said it wrong. IBCS is the company. So it's an international business standard company. I'm gonna throw it in the chat window here. And there's a whole methodology. Like if you're building a chart, this is a standard business language on how you build these visuals. You're not gonna find these visuals in standard visuals at Power BI. You just won't. So this whole this standards area, you can't build those, but you can build these with Charticulator. So if you need standard business language or visuals like these that I'm describing here, you have to get it from some specific place.
Well, and so my art, yeah. Go ahead, Seth.
Well, I mean, it's obviously a specific use case, right? It's where I want a particular visual to birds flying over.
Oh,
I want a particular visual to stand out, or I want something unique in infographic like on a report that I'm going to spend a lot more time building visually than to convey data, as opposed to I think where we as business intelligence folks are data driven, push the data out in a way that makes sense and is easily digestible.
Yep.
So there's a smaller use case I think for Charticulator or custom biz, but the fact that we actually have the ability to do it, I love. And I think it's worth it from that standpoint, because there's actually something I can myself go learn and do if I want to. I guess the one thing we haven't addressed, and Tommy, I'm not trying to shut off the other the other points you want to make around how useful it is, but how long, Mike, would you say does it take for a novice user to let's say they watch your videos?
Yep.
How long would you think it would take them to build their own custom visual or be well on the way? And that's a broad question because there's a lot of different things they can build. But
correct. So let's start with let's start with something you can't do today. Box and whisker plot, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that today inside desktop. And if you're going to go get it, you either have to go look at App Source. And I would say if you're going to build that, looking at the App Source, there's probably some stuff out there. And it'll probably take you a little time to learn it. So I would say you probably spend about an hour to 2 hours just going to App Source, finding a visual, downloading
figure
it,
out how it works,
dropping data on it. So that would be.
There's a pretty standard box and whisker plot that I think Jan's has. It's been out for a long time.
Yep.
So it's pretty.
Okay.
But you're conformed with whatever.
But not all custom visuals.
No.
Yeah.
Just at least I'll give credit where credit. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. So there are stuff. There's already pre-built stuff out there for you. So, but you have to learn that one. Again, same concept. On the flip side here, I would say so. I've just did a heat map for a client recently in Charticulator, and it took me probably about it now takes. I've been able to build it in like about 15 to 20 minutes. So, but I know what I'm doing a little bit because I've done it a couple times because I've had to build it for them. So, my argument here would be
what I'm asking is for the new user. What is the time investment?
Yeah.
That I'm looking at incorporating to make Charticulator part of my toolbox.
A less thoughtful workflow of using the UI, basically, right?
Yep.
Where it's kind of like part of familiar UI, more or less.
And again, I think I'm trying to change the tides here from producing lots of content that explains like what and how I'm building things. So I'm assuming that you kind of know how those work. I mean, I would say 30 minutes to an hour to build a visual. And so where I think you lose time in Charticulator is like you have this. So in your mind, you have this vision of like, I need to build this visual, right? Even within Charticulator, there's a framework, and like you put a chart or an axis down, you're like, that axis doesn't look right. And so like you start where I think I find myself losing time on it is where I try to over refine the visual specifically. And that's when I lose a lot of the extra time. So like, getting stuff on the page, like I'm just going to plot, a box and whisker by dimension, easy, pretty straightforward. But it's when I start going like, oh my gosh, I didn't know I could add color to the bar in the middle. Well, maybe I should do that. And then you basically take the standard visual that you have and you're now starting to tweak it. And no, I don't like the colors on that. I'm actually going to change the line that goes between the whiskers. That's going to be a different color. And then maybe the whiskers, the start and the end will be another different color. So now I spend more time kind of stylizing it, making it like look, clean or fresh. And like, so that's where I think I spend a lot more of my time beyond I just need the whisker plot to work. And so I think that's another level above like, okay, we go to the app source and Tommy, who was the guy who made the
Jan's Peter. I'm gonna find
Jan Peterson,
because Jans Peterson, yeah,
Yeah.
and I that's when I use a box plot. I
Yep.
use his.
You use his. So but you can't. I mean, you get a limited amount of feature sets, right? So I can't change the length of the height of the whiskers on either end. I can't change, the color of the line in the middle. I can't change the color of the box that I'm using to design. So if I'm trying to then take that box and whisker plot and style it to my rest of my report, that's when you need a little bit extra help. And I would argue, at the end of the day, Charticulator will always be faster, or more often be faster than when building a full custom visual to get exactly what you want.
I think the point I want to make in this conversation to the wider audience would be this: Charticulator is worth learning.
Yep.
Especially with the content that you put out there to outline and take away some of the really challenging, I don't get it kind of questions.
Yep.
And the reason being is, if you think about where we spend the vast majority of our time, it's in the data. And we're really spoiled from the standpoint that we can just drag and drop, or, pull some columns into another visual, and it just automatically looks right. And it works. And we don't spend any time in visualization for the most part.
Agreed.
So is this a challenge or a difference to that? Yes. But even to your point, if I can stand up and learn the concepts, and then I'm going to go devote a big chunk of time towards building something that I want to look a certain way, it's worth it, right? And the fact is like, it's just, I think, a mind shift for individuals, or business in general, to focus a little bit more time on the visual aspect of things, because there's a lot of UI UX, there's a lot of visualization area that gets a lot more conversation, I think, outside the Power BI realms, because we're just spoiled from the standpoint of like, well, we're data folks and we throw data together and these visuals just automatically work and they interact with each other and we can do all these things.
Yep.
What? You want me to learn Charticulator? And like, I have to, well, yeah. I mean, it opens up a whole new world of customization that is now, in this, newer framework that is going to challenge you a little bit, but definitely worth the time to invest a little bit in understanding how it works, so that if you're challenged with, can I build this thing? The answer is yes. It's just going to take X amount of more time, because you have this new feature that allows you to do that, versus, oh no, it's just Power BI. It comes out of, nobody built it for me, so I can't do it.
Right. And so, and my argument is not that it's not a powerful tool and you can't do these things. I do have a frustration though, because I usually learn by reverse engineering.
Yep.
So I've downloaded the templates, but this seems to be very difficult to kind of like break apart from the something built and then kind of see all the components.
Agree with that.
So it seems, and again, that's maybe why I haven't been able to wrap my head around everything, is because that's usually how I begin to comprehend something, and start with that finished product, then understand the glyphs, understand why the your axis line is basically how it's linked together. It's like the formulas that some of the templates have. I'm like, I can't see the whole formula, and two, it's hard to reverse engineer.
You're touching on a point, Tommy. You're touching on a point though that I think is actually very weak in the community, particularly for this one, and I'm looking to address this. Right. So one of the things I think that's very important here is there's this concept of a template, right? So I think you bring up a really strong point here, right? If I build a visual and it has 3 data points, a dimension and 2 numbers, right? I should be able to describe that information and export out that visual and give it to somebody else and allow them to import that template and then start from where I finished. So my total argument, so that's why I actually produced another whole gallery of custom visuals that I produced inside Power BI Tips. So gallery.powerbitips, I just threw it out there, /sign/charts. This is my gallery of charts that I've built that you can just go download and use. Now, it's still not, the whole Charticulator application is not quite there yet. In the one that you can use in desktop now, there is actually an export button. It will export the standard of the entire visual for you in JSON form. So I have goals here. I'm trying to work on some code on our Power BI Tips side, where you can just take that entire spec, that template spec, and just save it somewhere. So I think there's a need here. Like when I build a bar chart, or if I build a box and whisker plot, right? I need to take the template of whatever I produced and share that. So this is another area where the adoption of the tool grows faster when you have a collection of community members, some that are experts and some that are not, where they're all working together to build these collection of things. And so right now what I'm doing is trying to figure out a way of like, can I take things that people are producing in Charticulator, export them, give you a library area where you can see them work, and then you can then go play with them. And now you have this ability of in a library or gallery, like browse through thousands of custom made visuals. I mean, just by doing that, you could easily eclipse all the visuals in the app source in a week or two. Based on my usage on Charts.Power BI Tips, 5,000 visuals have already been made. There's only like 300 on the App Store. So if you give people the tool, Microsoft's really good at giving people a framework, but they really require the community to stand behind it and build it. And I think there was in my opinion, there's a huge miss in Charticulator where they lost most of the community activity around it. And so that's where I'm trying to fill in a lot of the need here for exactly your point, Tommy. The community needs to rally around it. They never had it. They
never had a big push or boost. I think what you're proposing is a fantastic idea. Like, you want a box and whisker? Here's 10 versions.
Yeah,
right. Like you start
and then you can style from there.
A lexicon of custom visuals to make the tool the plug and play kind of thing that we're used to. Because for those that don't want to go build their own thing, there's a lot of you're bringing up like how do we extend it and make it a more used
but to Tommy's
thing. But
to Tommy's point, I should be able to type in box and whisker, and I should be able to see 6 different versions of people building it. Right. I should be able to download it, import it right into the tool.
Absolutely agree.
So if you look what they're doing now in the desktop version, they actually have import template on the main page. So they're expecting. So I have gotten also. Microsoft, take note. I have an issue with some of your Charticulator stuff now because it's kind of buggy. It doesn't. There's times when it crashes and it won't save correctly. The newest version they came out with, there's properties in the right-hand side window, but they don't adjust anything. Like you can say size, width, and the trim borders. I adjust them and it crashes or breaks or it doesn't adjust them the way I was expecting it to. So it gets very so it's still not there yet. There still needs to be more feature sets added to it, and it's in my opinion, the desktop application, the custom visual you bring in, is probably a slightly bit more buggy than the one I see in the website. So the website charticulator.com seems a bit more robust, and when you use that one, you can actually export a PBI viz file, so it compresses all the code down to a single file, and that single file is what you use in desktop. So you have to basically build the visual, download it, and then you can import it as a custom visual, and then it just works. I think that is a little bit more repeatable.
So the export out of desktop doesn't allow you to do that, is what you're saying.
Well, so the export into
these are different file formats, right?
No,
JSON.
Yeah, so the export in desktop is just a JSON structure, and it doesn't even give you the ability to make a file. When you hit export in desktop, it says the code that you need has been copied to your clipboard. Go save this JSON file into a JSON file on a code editor program and save it as .tlpt files format. I'm like, okay, Microsoft, you're really trying here, but you really missed the boat on this one. Like, if you want to make it easy for people to export crap, you need to give them like the pop-up modal. You need to give them the save button, and it needs to just drop a file to your desktop
as a PBI viz that I can use elsewhere.
Oh, yes.
Well, and then too, when you're importing, if you don't have all the data types, so you can't like say, just let me load it as is.
That's fixed now. That's fixed.
Oh, that is fixed.
Yeah. Okay. So in the new version, if it knows there's a library of columns it's trying to look for, and if you add columns to the visual, it says, "Hey, we're missing the data mapping." So that's a new feature they add. Again, that was another one of these like you have to have this data mapping feature first before you could even make templates.
Yeah.
Because you can't be sharing proprietary column names to people all over the internet. That just doesn't work.
Right. And one thing I want to say, and I love this because I see like what you're trying to do with like, it's almost like creating custom visuals for custom visuals, right? So having this gallery, just don't categorize everything with analytics. Maybe have a little more specified categories. So, because yeah, saying like what you're trying to do, like this is like something for marketing, because again, all those samples are so intense.
Yep.
It's not in a sense simple, but I'm trying to think of how that type of idea of having that gallery where you say box and whisper or search based on description or title is going to, I think, not the only way, but I think probably right now in my head, the most direct way to make this scalable and more globally used.
Oh, 100%.
I don't want to be having our things nobody uses V2 next year and have Charticulator as part of that conversation.
It will be unless we do something about it, and it will,
right,
and it won't be used unless we push my. So I think the fact that I was very vocal about it, it's probably I wasn't the guy, but like the fact that the community kind of rallied around Charticulator and said this is a thing that we want. You're missing, like, Microsoft has to make choice on what they invest their dollars in. They're either going to invest their money in like making more AI visuals, or they're going to invest their money in making more things like goals in the service, or they're going to spend money on Charticulator. So like the community has to have a loud enough voice to say this is adding enough value to me that we want you to spend money and resources on this to make it better. So like I feel like if we have to engage the conversation, and if you like what it's doing, if you feel like it fits a need or a gap, we need to be vocal about it. We need to produce tools around it. We need to promote it more, because that then drives Microsoft to say, oh, well, now, 1 in 3 reports are being published with a Charticulator app in it. Great.
Mm-hmm.
We should probably fix that more. We should make it better. Like we should make it easier for people to use.
Maybe we should create a banner on the site. It's just 3,201 Charticulator visuals downloaded. 3,452.
Just a ticker on it.
Go use Charticulator now.
Yeah. I think it helps though. I think it helps the fact that
I agree.
People get excited about it. People push for it. I think that's a good place.
I think the stuff that I've seen you come up with, Mike, Nick Snap, like the original, like there's some amazing things that you can do. And the fact that we have that at our fingertips with a little bit of a learning curve. Mm-hmm. But like if I spent a week in Charticulator, I guarantee you I could build those visuals.
Yeah, easily.
Right. And you think about how much time we spend in DAX or M,
right,
or
totally.
Other things. Like it is a quick, sharp learning curve, but very well worth it.
Yep.
Very well worth it. And Mike put out all this content, so you've just streamlined.
I love it.
That experience.
And that's the whole goal. Like people are lazy. Right? People want it. Yeah. People want to hand me the button, right? And what you're going to see here in the future, hopefully, and again, this is a Michael can get time to figure this stuff out. Is you're going to see more gallery items. You're going to see more things like, and I'm even taking notes here because I think Tommy has great points. Right? We need a library of everyone who's making box and whisker plots, right? We need the gallery of these templates that you can go get, try them, and put them right into desktop. So, it needs to be a searchable list of custom code by name, description, an image potentially of a sample image of what it would look like, who the author was, and then be able to download the JSON code so you can just go use the PBIT or the template file type and just load it in. So I'm making notes on this now, so I know how to build the gallery.
With that mechanism, right? With charts or whatever,
yep.
you can update from the download thing, right?
Correct. So when you initially load,
take your template and then tweak it.
Correct.
Yeah.
So
that's super powerful.
That's the part you need that. Yeah. So
let's just build our own custom visual gallery, right? We'll have our search. We'll have you can also, it falls into the bucket of.
I already have it. It's
patterns,
already there. I've got the old version of the tool. It's here. 1, 2, 1.
But again, and what I want to see too is with all the galleries, and I'm looking at your gallery right now.
16.
Right now, I see Charticulator again, not doubting or not putting down at all the powerful features and what it can do, or even is it worth it. But where I see it right now, in terms of at least the samples that I see, is it makes more sense in a newspaper article where it's in between like 2 texts of paragraphs than it does in the middle, like in a Power BI report.
Or very specific use cases.
Right, exactly. Or very, very specific use case, when personally, from what I'm hearing from you, from what I've seen, it doesn't have to be these ridiculously complex things. It can just be some sort of a tweak. Daniel,
correct.
Deneb, he did a KPI.
Yep.
and it was like, oh,
it
this
looks
is
gorgeous.
right, and it looks amazing.
But you can't do that
So,
today. Like you can't change the background color. You can't have all the text is
right,
white. Like it does that one level above. I mean, it could be like a simple,
right.
spark line kind of thing,
So
and that's it.
yeah,
Yeah, totally
and
agree.
so the gallery, and I think that idea is that
Yeah,
will kind of transform it from being part of New York Times study on the U.S. Census to being part of something that can be applicable to one, people can get an easy template to understand it, rather than, again, this everything is a complex formula where it's just something basic to start off with, and then it becomes part of, again, the workflow.
yeah, I would agree
There's
with
a
that.
reason why tabular editor and has become part of your workflow.
Yep.
You know,
But again,
so just
I mean, how much time does it take you to learn tabular editor? I mean, I've spent days and hours of that
yeah,
learning that thing too. So that's another one of these like so you can do most of what tabular editor is doing in desktop. Why would you take the
sure,
time to learn another external tool?
because it becomes worth it.
Because it comes worth it. And
And
it's those use cases. Like, does it make your life simpler? Yes or no? Can it do more capability than what you have in standard desktop? Yes or no? I think those are some decision points on whether you invest your time in it.
and I think Charticulator could be something where every report can see a use case. Right now, maybe like 1 out of 15 requests or projects may be a use case.
Agreed.
And like, I mean, you can probably always find a reason, but like tabular editors become a necessity because of what the scripts can do, the best practice analyzer. So that's what
Yeah.
I want to see,
Yeah.
But that is, in order for a tool to be used in 3 instead of 15 reports, the only difference is you as an individual having that as part of your tool belt. If you want to build something, you can do that effectively and efficiently,
Yeah.
because you've learned Charticulator, you've just made yourself more powerful.
Yep.
In solving problems. Because I know that's where Mike is. Like, oh, you want me to do that? Yeah, not a problem. Versus,
We can't do that.
well, we could do
No.
that, but I think, and all I'm saying is, like, when you invest the time, Charticulator absolutely could be one of those things that is used a lot more often than just the specific use case we talked about a little bit more.
And which I completely agree. But again, it goes back to, for the majority, like, if 50% of Power BI authors are using Charticulator, I don't know what percentage of people are, for example, using the external tools, but in order to scale it out, because you're always going to have the mics, and you'll have like basically like 3 levels of people, whereas the people who are talking about it, people who are pros at it, and the people who dabble in it.
Yep.
And right now, I think that range, and that's for anything, but this range right now it's very small for the people who are talking about it. I think 2 people, and it's even smaller for those pros on it. And like, that's where that range can kind of grow out, because of course you
Agreed.
can learn it, and we know. So it's just, how do you get people to begin to adopt it?
This is
and
the same
find it worth it.
This is the same problem we have with data modelers, right? So if you have a data modeler, so for every one data modeler you have on your team, strong data modeler, you're going to have probably about 5 or 6 report builders, right? So there's going to be a team or a person who's sharp at making the model, and then once they build the model, there's a kind of a team that you have around that can jump into that and help produce reports from that model. So as you grow that circle out, and then you have, from that circle, you have, for every 5 or 10 report builders, you have 30, 40, maybe 50 report consumers that just want to look at a report. Make it for me. I just want to log in and see the data. Like, so that circle widens out. And I'm not going to expect every report viewer to be a data modeler, right? That takes a specific skill set to get there. And I think we're seeing the same action here, right? There's a handful, and this is what I've said from the beginning, there's a handful of really knowledgeable people who know how to use Charticulator at a very high level that can do really cool things with it. There's not a good sharing mechanism, and that's why I built the gallery. That's why I have all these things. That's why I'm doing the videos, is because we need more builders, but we need these templates to be more widely accessible. A collection of templates that people can just go consume, so that way they can just easily go try out 4, 5, 6 different styles of a chart and see them and say, oh, this is how these work. Awesome. Now that I know how it works, I can then just go download the template and start from there. And the neat part about this is too, like, imagine if you go to AppSource and you had downloaded a visual from AppSource, and once you downloaded it, you have the starting point. Like, what if you downloaded the box and whiskers from
you're
and
lowering
then
lowering the
tweak it.
bar for for entry,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, and I think you have to do that with this type of tool.
So
I think you
so
have.
maybe you'll see in the future App Source will allow you to upload your Charticulator template, and then you'll have
the R visuals.
Yeah, and maybe you'll have an App Source download Charticulator template, right? Maybe that will be a thing. I don't know. I think that Microsoft would like to get there. I think there's too many privacy concerns that they have that makes that prohibitive for them. So I think they're leaning on the community to kind of roll this out and figure out how to make it work.
More
I
to come
thoroughly
on
enjoyed.
Charticulator.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to quickly, a little related but unrelated, is when we talked about custom visuals a while back, we said there's no categorization like for custom visuals. I think Christopher Wagner and DataTales actually put together a Power BI report. I'm going to put that in the chat right now. But it's actually exactly what we were hoping for.
Well,
and it's at the very
Gil Revive also has one too, which I really like.
I've seen that. Yeah.
Well, no, this is it's a Power BI. This doesn't show the cost. It's basically like that Power BI cheat sheet, the one that Marco Russo had.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I've seen his. Yep.
So yeah, and this, if you scroll to the bottom of that page, you can download the template. So I just want to give credit to that. And again, just to tie that back, you can, if you have this type of gallery, then you can begin to tie things. Say this is a relational thing. This is over time Charticulator visual. So what you're trying to do, and that where I think where the power could be of finding a sample that's right for you, and then beginning to try to begin to learn it more. But I thoroughly enjoyed this, man. It was great.
On that note,
it was great. So it's already
Did you send the
time? Did
you send the link, Tommy, for the one that you were talking about? I don't see that link yet.
You don't see it? Okay, so for whatever reason,
did you put it on the?
If you just go to
chat window, what am I looking for?
If you just go kratosbi.com, you should have seen it. So here, try it. Maybe if you send it, because for whatever reason it's not sending. So that's strange.
And it's what's the name of it? It's like a cheat sheet.
The data visualization guide. Yeah.
All right, I'll see if I can get that real quick. See if I can find that. I did put in. So I
just sent it in the chat.
Perfect. Awesome. There it is. Getting started with BI. I think I found it. So I also put in here a link to Gil Revive's link. He actually has gone through and made a custom visual, or basically a report. Sorry, he made a report for all the visuals that are in the App Source, and you apparently every time you upload an App Source item, you can download a sample PBX file, but it's not easy to do so when you go to App Source Store. It's hidden as a link, but the link is there. You just can't access it. So in Gil's Power BI file, he exposes all the links to how to download the PBI Viz file, as well as a sample report, so you can see how these sample reports are built and created as well. So I put that in the link as well if you guys want to go look at his report as well. All right, and with that, Tommy, where can you find us on the podcast?
You can find the podcast anywhere podcasts are available. We do an episode every Tuesday and Thursday. So subscribe on your favorite platforms. Make sure on Apple and Spotify, leave a rating and a review. That really helps us out. If you want to join in on the conversation live, Tuesday and Thursday morning, 7:30 a.m. Central, Power BI Tips YouTube channel. We have all of our upcoming live streams, I think for the next 4 already available. And if you want to submit a topic for us to argue about or talk about, just go to the Power BI Tips website, and there's a podcast page on the menu bar, because I'm not going to say the whole thing anymore. Can't do it. At the very bottom, there's a form you can submit, or mention Power BI Tips on Twitter with the hashtag EMP mailbag.
Awesome. And with that, we thank you very much. Please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you like this kind of content. If you want to hear more about this, or again, have suggestions, hit us up in the link in the description. There's actually a link there, so you can just add your comments. And also, find a friend. If you enjoyed this and you have someone else at your work that would also like to join us, please tell them about it, share it with them, communicate with them about what we're doing here. And we'd love to have and spread the word about all the fun things around Power BI and the community. Thank you all very much. Seth, Tommy, it has been a blast. I'll see you next week.
Good weekend, guys.
Good luck getting home.